at number 10, NASA is hiding alien life on Mars. This is a classic and long-held conspiracy belief. For a long time, tin hat theorists have had theories about what is going on our neighbouring red planet and have accused NASA of knowing more than they let on. In the 1970s, NASA sent probes Viking 1 and Viking 2 to study Martian soil, then rovers Spirit and Opportunity to Mars. While everything they found hasn't been released to the public, we do know quite a lot. The theories out there range from mustache twiddling sounding to wacky whack whack. Sometimes I just make sounds instead of saying words. The milder suggestions are that NASA are hiding alien fossils up there. Others say that they're purposefully avoiding looking for life. Others have gone full throttle and have accused NASA of hiding a race of alien human half-breeds up there for the past 40 years. Coming in at number 9, we have the boombox. So word of mouth has it that a NASA engineer has developed a specialist piece of equipment to battle the rising threat of terrorism, and it was being tested out at an airport in Israel. The legend says that NASA tech was used to create a specialist scanner that would detonate any explosive that was within it. So in practice, anyone suspected of wearing a suit vest could be put in the upright scanning booth, and if they were innocent, they would be fine, but if they had any explosives on them, then they would be detonated in the sealed cell. Snopes have looked into this one, and I'll let you guess what they found. Coming in at number 8, we have the quarantine. It is widely believed that NASA has a strict protocol for people who come into contact with aliens. It is thought that those who report seeing aliens are visited by special secret agents before they leak their news stories. Why? Well, apparently NASA wants to keep us in the dark when it comes to alien life. Conspiracy theorists who believe this often cite the small print of Title 14 Section 1211 of the Code of Federal Regulations, and this actually does say that NASA has the power to quarantine anyone that comes into contact with people or objects returning from space. This is allegedly a safety measure that came to pass in the Apollo 11 era. Although the truth has been manipulated a bit, it makes sense to quarantine people returning from space if they've been outside of their spaceships, because space materials such as moon dust, for example, could contaminate the Earth and mess with our ecosystem. This is of course just a biological precaution, but there are some people out there who have taken this to mean that men in black are coming for you if you so much as see errant lights in the sky. Side note, I really loved Men in Black. Like, I don't think they should remake it, but I'm definitely up for like another movie screening of it. Has it been 20 years yet? Must have been. Coming into number 7, we have the secret shuttle. I have to say that this one is a bit of a mystery. It's pretty suspicious. NASA has allegedly had a secret space shuttle in orbit for the past 2 years. What it is up to, we simply don't know, but it has been spotted on a number of occasions by people with long exposure lenses. It is said that the craft, an X-37B, was launched from Elon Musk's SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket at NASA's Kennedy Space Station in Florida. We know that the USA largely considers space a national security risk, so perhaps these secret orbit missions have something to do with that. Coming into number 6, we have the UFO live stream. On July the 9th, 2016, NASA was live streaming from the International Space Station when 2 mysterious unidentified flying objects were spotted flying in the background. Weirdly, the stream was cut just as the objects were spotted. YouTube channel StreetCap1 uploaded a video about it, suggesting that it could have been proof of alien life and that NASA didn't want us to see it. NASA spokesman Daniel Holt told CBET that actually the live stream was not cut deliberately, it was just a coincidence. Or was it? A lot of alien conspiracy theorists have taken this as evidence that the truth is out there, but NASA do not want us to know about it. The fact that we haven't solved world hunger, national poverty divides, or even local disadvantage makes this one pretty scary. Coming in at number 5, we have the $1 billion ballpoint pen. A pen that works in space is actually a lot harder to come by than it sounds. It seems that ballpoint pens don't work in space, and pencils aren't great either as they break, and tiny bits of lead just aren't great for floating around in spaceships. The story goes that NASA thought it was truly integral to be able to write in space, so they spent millions of dollars creating a pen that works at zero gravity in cold conditions. These days with inflation, that figure is said to be $12 billion. That makes it the world's most expensive pen in history. This is crazy because I write for a living, but I haven't touched a pen in months. It seems that there is a shred of truth to this legend. NASA stocked its astronauts with a pen patented by Paul C. Fisher. Now, he invested $1 million of his own money into it, but that doesn't make for such a fun tale. You can actually buy a 50th anniversary edition of said pen, perfect for those planning a trip to space this year. Coming into number 4, we have the fake moon landing. Time and time again, NASA have been accused of faking the moon landing, and if that were true, it would be so scary, not least because of the whole lying to the whole world thing. Why? Why would the moon landing have been faked? What reason would they have for doing this? Well, apparently the reasoning behind the widespread conspiracy is that the United States wanted to win the Cold War, but honestly, winning the space race to the moon was kind of risky. It kind of stoked the fire a little bit. Theorists say that the whole thing was filmed in a studio and that NASA and the American government wanted to manipulate minds of the world into believing the USA was the greatest country. Basically, it was one very expensive piece of propaganda. How far would the government go to get people to believe the lie? Well, again, according to theorists, the CIA and NASA were involved in destroying evidence and murdering witnesses. Do I believe this? No, I don't. But if it were true, then it would be one of the greatest lies and biggest cover-ups of all time. Coming into number 3, we have aliens during the moon mission. While the majority of people do admit that NASA did manage to get to space and land on the moon, a lot of people think that they haven't been honest about what they found. Rumour has it that during the Apollo 10 mission, astronauts heard alien music as they orbited the dark side of the moon, and others say that Buzz Aldrin spotted alien activity during the Apollo 11 moon landing mission. The astronaut himself has since denied it. Coming into number 2, NASA wouldn't tell us if we were doomed. Or so they say. NASA knows a lot more than we do when it comes to the fate of our planet. Face it. The average human has never looked through a telescope, let alone had the ability to understand and monitor what's going on around our planet for thousands and thousands of light years. We know that a supervolcano could erupt and devastate countries and states, a tsunami could sweep an ocean village away forever, a tornado could rip through the heart of a country, etc, etc. But we only know about these things because we're told in advance. Without being told in advance, we would only find out when it was too late. The same thing goes for asteroids and astronauts and flying bits of space junk, or even wilder, alien invasions. NASA would know about life-altering asteroid collisions long before it happened, and while it's likely that something would be assembled to try and stop it, belief has it that the space organization would not tell us if we were doomed for fear of inciting panic or anarchy. Finally, coming into number 1, NASA is creating a black hole that will kill us all. We know that black holes exist out there in space, but the nearest one to us is thousands of light years away. Because we know so little about black holes and what happens on the other side of them, there are scientists out there trying to replicate the conditions on Earth. It seems that this possibly could be done using the world's largest and most powerful particle accelerator, the Large Hadron Collider. Hearsay and rumour have it that NASA are trying to make a black hole using the 17-mile-long collider, and if they did, the world could be sucked into a giant vacuum of nothingness. In actuality, NASA have nothing to do with the collider. It's a project by CERN, the European Organisation for Nuclear Research. Also, guys, you can sleep safely for now. The Collider project is on hiatus for 2 years. Alright, coming in at number 10, we have the real distance to the moon. A conspiracy theorist by the name of Richie from Boston uploaded a video. In the YouTube video, they claimed that NASA is lying to us about the distance to the moon. The moon is at its furthest 252,088 miles from Earth, and at its closest is 225,623 miles away. It takes about 3 days for a spacecraft to get there, or so we're told. Richie uploaded a sensational video to YouTube claiming it is only 4.7 miles away from Earth. He claimed to have used a normal digital camera to zoom in on the moon. He says that NASA is lying about the real distance and that he estimates it to be mere miles. He said, "I can zoom in more on the moon than I can on a building that I can see with my naked eye." Right. Why exactly NASA would be lying about the size and distance of the moon? Well, it doesn't get that far. Coming into number 9, astronauts wear diapers. Think being an astronaut would be the coolest job in the world? I do, although apparently they wear huge adult diapers and have to relieve themselves in them. This urban legend is actually true. NASA astronauts are issued with maximum absorbency garments. It seems that back in the day, astronauts had to wee and poop themselves when they needed to go. These days they are mainly used for urination, but they are comforting to astronauts who aren't sure when they can make it back to their spacecraft. Coming into number 8, we have the Great Wall of China. Okay, so this isn't so much a scary urban legend, but this is one of the most popular urban legends surrounding NASA. A lot of people think that you can see the Great Wall of China from space, but it turns out you can't really. You can, however, in low orbit, see the Hoover Dam. The rumour comes from a book written by Richard Halliburton in 1938, in which he said that astronomers theorised that the Great Wall was the only man-made object visible from the moon. You'll note that the date of this was actually long before NASA went to the moon. Somehow the idea stuck. Coming into number 7, we have Nixon's death speech. On the 20th of July 1969, President Nixon made the longest distance phone call ever at the time. He called the astronauts up on the moon. He called the Apollo 11 astronauts to congratulate them for the moon landing. However, it seems he wasn't all that confident the NASA team would make it. According to his former speechwriter William Safire, an emergency broadcast had been scripted in the event that the mission failed. This speech was leaked some 30 years later. It read, "Fate has ordained that the men who went to the moon to explore in peace will stay on the moon to rest in peace. These brave men, Neil Armstrong and Edwin Aldrin, know that there is no hope for their recovery, but know that there is hope for mankind in their sacrifice." Apparently it continued with some bodies on the moon imagery. Scary. Coming in at number 6, we have sperm in space. Is NASA blowing its load all over space? What does that even mean? According to the internet, in April 2018, NASA sent humans and bull sperm to the International Space Station. It seems that the experiment is actually true. NASA wants to see how weightlessness affects sperm. Why? Well, they didn't give a full reason for that. A lot of people are saying it's because they're preparing for the apocalypse and they want to see whether or not humans can reproduce in space. In 1998, it was found that aquatic invertebrates were able to reproduce in space, but it is thought that babies born in space would develop a whole host of issues from a lack of gravity. Coming into number 5, we have Anonymous. In 2018, Anonymous released a video saying that NASA knew about intelligent alien life. The hacktivist said that there is something going on in the skies above. A NASA spokesman, Thomas Zurbuchen, was reported to have said the following: "Taking into account all of the different activities and missions that are searching for alien life, we are on the verge of making one of the most profound, unprecedented discoveries in history." Anonymous since removed the video, and NASA denied any knowledge of intelligent life. What's going on? What is the real reason that NASA hasn't gone back to the moon since the 1970s? Why did nobody ever set foot on the dark side? Could it be this at number 4? We have the ghostly moon music. The astronauts on the Apollo 10 mission passed around the moon, and when they were at the farthest side away, the dark side, they lost all radio contact with the ground control. As Apollo careered around the moon, they heard some really weird sounds that couldn't have been coming from their radio. They were so weird that the astronauts talked about it constantly. The sounds weren't reported at the time, but they were recorded and received by NASA when the mission returned to Earth. Now, these recordings were classified, which means that they were being safeguarded from human ears. Why? We just aren't sure. In 2008, they were declassified, and you can hear the recordings. Now, if you read the transcript, you can see a big conversation about the weird woo noises. What were they? Coming into number 3, we have the white flags. It is said that all of the flags left by astronauts on the moon, a total of 6 American flags, have all turned white. It was said that the initial flag planted by Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin fell over when Apollo 11 mission took off on its return. Despite that, all of the other 5 flags are present and correct and standing up tall and proud, although eerily, they've all turned white. Why? Well, because the moon doesn't have the same atmosphere as Earth and doesn't filter out UV rays in the same way. Some people highlight the creepy irony here. The moon was planted with American flags, but you can't tell what country the flags belong to anymore. Is this because you can't lay claim to the moon? Maybe. Coming in at number 2, astronauts go mad in space, and NASA doesn't like to admit it. There's a lot to be said about mental health and space. Spending days, sometimes weeks, or even months on end in the darkness is a scary prospect. Life isn't the same up in a shuttle. Not only does it take intense physical training to go up into space, it also takes a lot of mental focus. Dr. Patricia Santi, a psychiatrist who has worked with NASA employees, criticized the space agency for denying underlying behavioral issues. She suggested that actually they needed to do further screenings for mental health issues prior to and following space travel. In 2007, former astronaut Lisa Nowak, who worked on the International Space Station, was arrested for attempted murder. She then pleaded insanity and depression in court. Now, does this have anything to do with her time in space? Some people certainly think so. Finally, coming into number 1 of our top 10 scary NASA urban legends part 2, we have the alien signals. For the last decade, scientists have been picking up unexplained radio signals that they call fast radio bursts from deep space. So the signals have actually ranged in frequency, but the most recent are 580 megahertz, that's 200 lower than the previously heard. The latest sounds detected come from very, very far away, possibly billions of light years away. So I've got an example of some of the radio signals for you here. Have a little listen, and especially when the thudding kicks in, it's really weird. Scientists honestly don't know where the sounds are coming from, but they are trying to pinpoint them. A lot of people are saying that NASA knows where the signals are coming from and are involved in some kind of elaborate cover-up. Do NASA know what is living billions of light years away? Honestly, I don't think so.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have inventions. There are many rumors swirling around about the things that we use here on the ground that were created by NASA. These include things like Velcro or Tang, the powdered orange drink. While these are things that astronauts use, this one is only half true. Basically, those things weren't invented by NASA, but when Congress first created the space program in 1958, lawmakers insisted that the agency must also develop things that could benefit people on the ground. Apparently, a lot of people feel like we shouldn't be spending money on space while we have problems right here on the planet, so to combat these sort of space exploration skeptics, the brilliant minds of NASA have, throughout the years, developed quite a few interesting things that surely have benefited us here on the ground. Some examples refer to firefighters. The fireproof suits and the lightweight composite air tanks that many of them use are inventions made by people at NASA. The space agency was even able to create a portable device that has the ability to detect a human heartbeat under 20 feet of rubble, even in a noisy rescue environment. During the pandemic, when hospitals were most strained for resources, NASA developed a new high-pressure ventilator that used fewer than 100 parts, none of which were already needed in the supply chain for the already existing ventilator models. The device was patented, and then NASA released licenses to the world for free. This is all to say that maybe it wasn't Velcro they invented, but the legends are true. NASA has helped us on the ground while they invent things that will help them up in space. As one NASA person said, quote, "The Gap doesn't make astronaut helmets. We've got to make all of this stuff ourselves." In our number 9 spot today, we have the space pen. For years, there has been rumors swirling that NASA spends somewhere between $100,000 to $12 billion trying to invent a ballpoint pen that could be used in the zero-gravity environment of space, while the Russian space program just used a pencil. To be fair, any rumor that has a monetary range that big has to be just that, a rumor, but there is a little bit of truth to this one. There is no $12 billion space pen, and to be honest, NASA didn't even really spend a lot of money creating a space pen, but it was in fact a problem that did need to be solved. The first astronauts did use pencils in space, but here's the issue with that. Lead breaks. Usually on Earth this doesn't really matter because those tiny little pieces will just gravitate to the ground and we're hardly any the wiser. In space, however, those little lead pieces will float around, maybe into sensitive equipment, maybe into your eyeball, and also it's highly flammable, and the least amount of flammable material on a spaceflight, the better. In the end, while NASA did need a better writing alternative, the space pen ended up coming from Paul Fisher of the Fisher Pen Company. Paul used $1 million of his own money to fund the invention. He later sold 400 of them to NASA in 1967 at $2.95 each, which today would be about $25.82. An expensive pen for sure, but a pretty minuscule amount compared to regular space program spending, as well as the money that the rumor stated was spent. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Extraterrestrial Exposure Law. I don't want to speak for all of us, but I personally am into the idea that there are other intelligent life forms that exist somewhere out there. I know that's not everyone's cup of tea, and I get it, but some people are even more enthusiastic than I am, and they believe that not only do these life forms exist, but that they've visited Earth and that the government knows all about it, but just keeps it from us regular folk. There's one thing or rule, I guess, that people love to use in their argument to prove this extraterrestrial contact, and that is the Extraterrestrial Exposure Law. Basically, this was a rule that existed from 1969 to 1977, and it was meant to formalize NASA's, quote, policy, responsibility, and authority to guard the Earth against any harmful contamination resulting from personnel, spacecraft, or other property returning to the Earth after landing on or coming within the atmospheric envelope of a celestial body. This rule was created ahead of the Apollo 11 mission because, while we assumed the moon was lifeless, it was impossible at the time to know what microorganisms might possibly be there that could end up returning with the crew. Other people took this and ran with the idea and have now used this pretty fair and reasonable rule to mean it's proof that there must be alien contact, but it's just being kept from us. In our number 7 spot today, we have the moon landing. We have all heard of the many people out there who believe that the moon landing was fake. It's a tale that's been around since it happened, and until space travel becomes more of a normal thing, there will likely always be people who want to deny that it happened for some odd reason. There is, however, another legend surrounding the moon that isn't talked about quite as often. So, the famous Neil Armstrong line, the one he said in the monumental moment. Well, of course it was planned in advance of the landing, but it turns out he flubbed his line a little bit because who can focus on the lines when you're the first person on the frickin' moon? The line was originally supposed to read, "One small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind," but Neil forgot the A before man, so the line was recorded as "one small step for man." Not a big deal, basically the same thing, but then NASA tried to lie about it. Instead of being like, yeah, the guy's in space, he missed one syllable, who cares? They instead tried to blame it on static so that they could preserve the prosperity of the line. When they realized that one A does not ruin anything and that the public was perfectly happy with the line as recited, they decided to drop the static story and just let history be, well, that. In our number 6 spot today, we have the moon circle. Okay, one thing the internet loves to do is take something that is true and then spin it into something even more crazy that goes viral and instills fear in people everywhere. And that is exactly what this legend is all about. So, in 2010, there was a large volcanic eruption in Iceland. Following the eruption, there was a viral post going around that claimed that NASA had sent out a warning of possible acid rain as a result of particles that were flung into the air, and the result of this could range from baldness to skin cancer, because of course, the internet loves to make us all absolutely terrified. The post claimed that the indicator of the dangers was a dark ring that would appear around the moon. So of course, there was no threat of acid rain or going bald or getting cancer from this volcanic eruption, but there was a ring around the moon. Here's the thing about the ring though. It's not exactly a rare phenomenon. It's really just a result of clear skies and ice crystals in the upper atmosphere. It was just the perfect internet creation that had a small bit of truth mixed in with a ton of lies, and boom, you got a viral post. In our number 5 spot today, we have the knock. Okay, I'll be honest, this isn't a NASA urban legend, and instead it's one that comes from the China National Space Administration. So space is a vacuum, so it should be silent, right? We've heard about space roar, the alleged unsettling noise of space, but for the most part it should be relatively silent. That is exactly why this story makes for a great creepypasta, if it didn't turn out to be a real experience someone had. Back in 2003, Yang Liwei became the first astronaut sent into space by the Chinese space program. That's an amazing accomplishment and likely a very exciting adventure, so imagine his surprise when, as he's sitting in the space shuttle, he hears a knock. He described it as, quote, someone knocking the body of the spaceship just as knocking an iron bucket with a wooden hammer. Okay, perhaps we could just chalk this up to some extremely reasonable explanation, but he's not the only one who's heard it. There were other Chinese astronauts between 2005 and 2008 who reported hearing similar sounds, and it's not like you can just open the door to check. As of right now, the best guess as to what that knocking sound could have been, other than E.T., is a result of the change of pressure. In our number 4 spot today, we have a close call. If you're well versed in space things and NASA missions, when you think of Atlantis, you might think of the shuttle that had a long career with NASA and who journeyed around the Earth more than 4,848 times, but did you know that there was a point quite early on where the Atlantis almost was wiped from existence, along with the crew that was on board? During the launch of STS-27, which took place in 1988, debris from the right solid rocket booster struck the underside of the craft, which ended up severely damaging over 700 tiles on the outside of the craft, as well as taking one tile completely off. It might not seem like a lot, but every little thing matters a lot when you're doing something like going to space. So it's important to note that this mission was classified because of the fact that there was a surveillance satellite being launched along with it. Because of this, things had to be done a little differently than normal, so when the crew on board sent photos of the damage back to the ground, the photos were encrypted and they were extremely low quality. Mission Control deemed the damage to be just light and shadows and told the crew to continue, much to their dismay. Once landed, it became clear that Atlantis was the single most damaged shuttle that was thankfully able to successfully land. The survival of the crew came down to basically happenstance, which truly is terrifying. This was only the second mission after the disaster of the Challenger, so should this one have gone fatal, we likely wouldn't have seen the continuation of the program. In our number 3 spot today we have oceans. For a long time we have been searching for life on other planets, because if life was able to develop here, why would it not be able to develop in other parts of the universe, or even in our own galaxy? One of the things we look for on this search for life is the existence of water on other planets. For a long time people believed that we might be the only planet within our solar system that has the presence of water, and that truly is just because it is really hard to confirm the presence of water from far away. As technology has improved, however, we have come to find out that we certainly are not the only planet with water. Throughout space exploration, not only have we found evidence on other planets that at the very least there once was the existence of water, like on Mars for example. Here, the Curiosity rover found big slabs of rock that were the result of gravel being smushed together. This may not seem all that important, but because of the size and shape of the rock slabs, it is likely that they were formed by an ancient river stream that once ran on the surface of the planet long before we were able to get there. The water doesn't end here though. While Earth is the only known planet at the moment to have stable bodies of liquid water on its surface, scientists believe that there are several moons in our solar system that have great subsurface liquid deposits, but right now they're just under a ton of ice. Saturn's moon Enceladus and Jupiter's moon Europa are two of the biggest keys in this one, as there have been water plumes observed on both moons, which could signify liquid oceans covered in thick layers of ice. If that water exists on these moons, where else could it be hiding? In our number 2 spot today we have The Warning. On Tuesday, January 28th, 1986, the Space Shuttle Challenger launched on live TV, but just 73 seconds into its flight it disastrously disintegrated, taking the lives of all 7 people on board, which included high school teacher Krista McAuliffe, who was going to be the first non-military civilian in space due to the Teacher in Space program. Of course, investigations were immediately launched to figure out how this could have happened and what exactly went wrong. In fact, the president at the time, Ronald Reagan, appointed a special commission to investigate the causes, and as it turned out, the investigation report revealed that the disaster was, quote, an accident rooted in history. This basically confirmed the rumor that was swirling around that suggested NASA had previously known about the problems that led to the destruction of the Challenger and the subsequent fatalities. The least surprised of all was perhaps engineer Robert Boisjoli, who apparently sent an inter-office memo months prior to the tragedy warning of the exact fate the Challenger would meet should they continue to choose to launch the shuttle in such cold weather. Quote, the result would be catastrophic of the highest order, he wrote. Quote, loss of human life. In our number 1 spot today we have The Teacher. Speaking of the Challenger disaster, like I mentioned before, one of the people on board was the teacher Krista. After the Challenger, there was the devastating incident in 2003 when the Columbia also exploded, taking the lives of all of those on board. According to legend, there was another teacher, Barbara Morgan, who was supposed to be on both of those flights before getting bumped at the last minute. Is this legend true, and does she just have the most incredible luck? Well, kind of. As it turns out, she maybe wasn't bumped at the last minute, but she certainly was there for both events. In terms of the Challenger, Barbara was only supposed to be on the flight if something happened to Krista and she was unable to go. She trained with Krista and the rest of the crew for the flight, but of course prior to takeoff, Krista was fine and boarded as expected. In the case of the Columbia, well, the Teacher in Space program was discontinued after the Challenger explosion, but Barbara continued to work with NASA as an educator afterwards. In January of 1998, the program was restarted and she was scheduled to be on a shuttle mission to the ISS, but that was to take place after Columbia, which ended up breaking apart on re-entry. During the Columbia disaster, Barbara witnessed the entire thing from a chaser plane. Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have life on Mars. This is a legend that's been around for quite some time, especially since the 1970s when the Viking 1 and 2 were launched. This legend basically suggests that there is, or at least was, alien life on Mars, and that NASA knows about it, but they are just keeping the little secret to themselves. Like all space conspiracies, this legend ranges from some pretty out there but still based in reality ideas, all the way to absolutely absurd tinfoil hat vibes. What I mean is that some believe this is true because they claim to see alien fossils in the photos of the surface of Mars that we have. There are others who think that maybe NASA just isn't searching for signs of alien life at all. And then there are those who think that Mars is actually fully inhabited by like half alien, half human creatures and NASA's just hiding that from us. I'll let you decide on this one. In our number 9 spot today we have X-37B. So I guess this one is more like a NASA mystery rather than an urban legend, but basically they sent a space shuttle up, but no one knows exactly what it's for. Throughout the last few years, an X-37B spacecraft has gone on a number of different missions up into the orbit of Earth, but no one is willing to spill the beans on what these missions are aimed at doing. Of course, like with any legend, the theories are abound. Some people believe the purpose of these missions is to test out new technology. Very reasonable, but there are others out there who think that these missions are meant to destroy different satellites, or that this craft is really some kind of space weapon, but only time will tell if all of the secrets of the craft ever get declassified. In our number 8 spot today we have the live stream. This is an urban legend that stems from an ISS live stream a few years ago. Back in 2016, alien enthusiasts and UFO watchers noticed as they watched a live stream that was being broadcast from the ISS two objects that seemed to be entering Earth's atmosphere. These objects were unidentified and they looked like they were tumbling toward Earth, so many people took this image to be UFOs. To only add more fuel to the fire shortly after these objects could be seen, the live stream was cut off abruptly. NASA swears that this was merely just a coincidence, and while that is possible, not everyone is convinced that's the case. In our number 7 spot today we have changes. Okay, other than those who have been to space, who's to say what experiencing something like that would do to just your entire outlook on life, and especially your mental health. I mean, on one hand it's gotta be one of the most incredible experiences, but on the other side it would be terrifying and probably kind of lonely. Spending weeks and sometimes even months in the vast darkness of space, as amazing as it sounds, it likely isn't for the faint of heart. That is exactly why this NASA legend suggests that many of the astronauts who have been to space have returned with changes in their behavior, and apparently NASA has done everything they can to deny this. It is said that there is a psychologist who has worked with many NASA employees who actually went on to criticize the agency for denying that these behavioral changes existed, and she even suggested that they be looked into and researched more because she believes it goes deeper than any of us may even realize. This would include more in-depth screening both before and after the missions. This legend is likely to have developed in 2007 after former astronaut Lisa Nowak was arrested for harming someone, to which she pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. In our number 6 spot today we have the Mystery House. You may or may not have heard about the Mystery House that was seen on the moon in November of last year. This mysterious object was spotted by the U-2 rover, but at the time this rover was at such a distance it needed time to get there to check it out. Months later, when the rover arrived, it was released that it was in fact just a weird shaped rock, but not everyone is convinced, and legend has it this just may be a cover-up for what this Mystery House really is. Of course, people believe that this mysterious object likely has some sort of alien or extraterrestrial origin, despite what researchers are saying. In our number 5 spot today we have space signals. It is no secret that NASA has been tracking and looking into a ton of mysterious radio signals referred to as fast radio bursts that have been detected in space. Some of these signals we have been able to find the source of, but some have been plaguing the minds of scientists everywhere since they were first discovered. Legend has it, however, that NASA knows exactly where these signals are coming from, and of course it's aliens, but they just don't want to tell us. What do you think? Do you think NASA would keep aliens a secret from us, or is this just some space conspiracy sort of stuff? Let us know down below in the comments. In our number 4 spot today we have black holes. Of course, black holes are one of the most terrifying and mysterious parts of space, and while we know they exist, we really don't know much else about them. Of course, people and researchers will try to get a closer glimpse at them and maybe even try and take matters into their own hands and attempt to recreate the conditions of a black hole right here on Earth. The world's largest particle accelerator, the Large Hadron Collider, or LHC, which has been credited with proving the existence of the Higgs boson particle, is part of the source of another space legend, and that has to do with the idea that NASA is creating their own black hole. Some believe this project is intentional, while others just worry about it becoming a reality accidentally. It's true that if this were to happen it would be bad news, but luckily this probably isn't very likely and may not even be possible. In our number 3 spot today we have secrets. Of course, NASA knows a lot more than the average person would when it comes to the likely fate of our planet. I mean, they know a lot more about the planet than the average person, and tell me this, when was the last time you even looked through a telescope? It's just safe to say they are better briefed on all of the cosmic horrors that threaten our planet. We are definitely more well versed with the disasters that we may face here on the planet, but when it comes to threats that sit thousands of light years away, well, we definitely aren't the experts. That is the basis for this theory or legend that should NASA find out that we are facing some sort of humanity-destroying space threat, that they wouldn't even tell us. NASA would likely know about a life-altering asteroid collision long before it happened, but some people think that even if they had the time to warn us, they just wouldn't. And it doesn't even stop at the usual threat like an asteroid. This belief includes things like pieces of space junk, an alien invasion, the sun burning us alive. Really, as wild as you can get, people think NASA would just keep it all a secret. In our number 2 spot today we have preparations. On July 20th, 1969, President Nixon made a call that would rack up some astronomically large long-distance charges when he called the Apollo 11 astronauts who were, at the time, on the moon. He of course wanted to congratulate them on this incredible achievement, but as it turns out, he maybe wasn't all that confident that the mission was going to be successful. His former speechwriter let it slip that there was in fact an emergency broadcast script that had been written should the mission have gone south. The speech was later leaked and it said, quote, "Fate has ordained that the men who went to the moon to explore in peace will stay on the moon to rest in peace. These brave men, Neil Armstrong and Edwin Aldrin, know that there is no hope for their recovery, but know that there is hope for mankind in their sacrifice." I know everyone's got to have a contingency plan, but if I was one of those astronauts, it would be a little bit chilling to have heard about the words that were prepared in the case that you were just being left out in space forever. In our number 1 spot today we have stuck. Recently on a Space Legends myth list, we talked about the Fisher space pen, and today we are talking about how it relates to another NASA legend. Basically, Nixon almost did have to use that speech he had prepared, because following the historic moonwalk, Aldrin and Armstrong discovered that a 1-inch engine arm circuit breaker switch had broken off the instrument panel. This was an integral part of getting the engine to ignite so that they would be able to make it back home, so rightfully so, they were pretty terrified. The broken switch was reported to Mission Control, but by the next morning they still didn't have a solution. Aldrin explained that, quote, "After examining it more closely, I thought that if I could find something in the LM to push into the circuit, it might hold. But since it was electrical, I decided not to put my finger in or use anything that had metal on the end." This is where the legend comes in. People claimed that he used one of the Fisher space pens to help him fix this broken switch, but that isn't entirely true. It wasn't a Fisher pen, but he did use one that had a felt tip. Aldrin said, quote, "I had a felt-tipped pen in the shoulder pocket of my suit that might do the job." He went on to explain, quote, "After moving the countdown procedure up by a couple of hours in case it didn't work, I inserted the pen into the small opening where the circuit breaker switch should have been and pushed it in. Sure enough, the circuit breaker held. We were going to get off the moon after all. To this day, I still have the broken circuit breaker switch and the felt-tipped pen I used to ignite our engines." If this didn't work, it is very likely that these astronauts would have been stuck on the moon. This was indeed a very serious problem that could have gone a much different way.
Number 10, Mariner 1. July 22nd, 1962. An Atlas rocket launch was successful at first. NASA's Mariner 1 spacecraft had hoped to be the first to fly by Venus and get ahead of the Soviet Union in this massive space race. Now, after the launch, it didn't take long for operations to quickly go south. The rocket was unable to steer itself and was heading towards a crash rather than the cosmos. Now, there's two things that could happen here. The rocket either lands into the North Atlantic shipping lanes or an inhabited area. Not ideal, so there's no choice other than to self-destruct. $720 million splashed down minutes later. It turns out this was all caused because one programmer left a hyphen out of one equation. That's how Longo was, where one hyphen just caused all that damage. Classic. Number 9, Phobos 1. 1998, we'll look over to the Soviet Union for this one. We'll go back and forth. Back in 1998, they launched the Phobos 1 spacecraft to study Mars's moons and even land a probe on Phobos, the largest moon of them. Now, on September 2nd, 1998, mission operators lost contact with the spacecraft and they never heard back. Yeah, it just ghosted them and then drifted away in space. That's a bit rude if you ask me. So what went wrong? Where did it go? Well, software uploaded on August 29th. Well, it turns out somebody missed a single character when they uploaded software on August 29th. Again, a single character caused all this chaos. This put the spacecraft in a steering test mode for some reason, which also deactivated the spacecraft's thrusters, so eventually the solar panels couldn't face the sun anymore and it ran out of battery power. And also, communication drifted away forever and then just died. That's so sad. Number 8, the second shortest spacewalk. Luca Parmitano, an Italian astronaut with the European Space Agency, faced what's possibly my new worst fear. Here we go. July 16th, 2013, not that long ago at all. During a spacewalk on the 36th expedition to the ISS, the International Space Station, Luca's helmet began to fill with liquid. Not water, but rather liquid coolant. Water would be bad alone, just splashing around in 0G, but liquid coolant, you can't even drink that, know what I mean? I mean, as if you could drink water in the suit, like it's Looney Tunes. Both are bad. The spacewalk continued for over an hour before Luca was back in the ISS and free from his suit of doom. Yeah, he was fine, but this accident could have been a lot worse. The second shortest spacewalk in the station's history. More than fair. Drowning in a weird liquid around your head, I couldn't even imagine. That's my new nightmare. Yep. Number 7, space workout gone wrong. Look, zero gravity, I can't even imagine how hard it is to stay in shape while you're floating on the ISS, just in space. It's funny to watch astronauts work out while they're strapped down to a treadmill, but it's vital for that return trip later on after the space mission is complete. They land back on Earth and they're like, oh yeah, gravity, oops. You know, gotta keep those legs nice and strong. Working out in zero gravity can have its dangers. Back in 1995, astronaut Norman Thagard was working out, getting his lunar leg day in, doing some knee bends, all that good stuff. But while doing so, one of the straps snapped off of his foot and flew upwards, hitting him in the eye. Yeah, gravity or not, that's gonna leave a mark. Thagard then had trouble looking at light from that point on, which when you're in space, that's really not ideal. Just trying to avoid the sun as it's going around you all day long, oh, that's exhausting. Steroid eye drops helped Thagard's eye ultimately, but it could have been a lot worse. Imagine losing an eye in space. Thor lost that eye in space, you know what I mean? Thor. That's pretty badass either way. Number 6, Apollo 1. The first fatal accident in the history of US spaceflight happened on January 27th, 1967. The first manned mission of the Apollo space program. Now, it happened during a simulated launch. A fire broke out in the command module of Apollo 204 at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station in Florida, ultimately taking the lives of astronauts Gus Grissom, Edward White, and Roger Caffey. Design flaws in the hatch door made it impossible to open in time to save the astronauts. So it was honestly just terrible situation. Apollo 13 faced issues as well in 1970 when an oxygen tank failed. The crew was supposed to head out to the moon, but they had to obviously return once faced with these impossible tasks. Ron Howard did a movie about it called Apollo 13. Done very well, but again, nothing can compare to the real situation, I bet. God, that's so scary. Anything like, all these sound terrifying, don't get me wrong, but like the fact they're happening in space or in like a really tight enclosed area, I'm sweating talking about it. Number 5, Soyuz 11. It was April 1971 when the Russians launched the world's first space station, Salyut 11. 3 cosmonauts aboard said space station spent 3 weeks observing, conducting experiments, dare I say, normal space station behavior. But their return trip, however, on June 30th, that's when things took a tragic turn. The spacecraft made a normal re-entry and a normal landing, but when the ground team opened up the hatch, all 3 cosmonauts had suffocated. See, what happened was a faulty air vent had opened 30 minutes prior when the descent module separated and the cabin just depressurized just like that. And from that point on, the Soviet and US space programs would now ensure that their astronauts are always wearing their spacesuits during any phase of any mission where depressurization depressurization could possibly occur. Just to be safe, yeah, it's terrifying. This is so terrifying. I'm literally sweating doing this list. Couldn't imagine how scary that would be. Number 4, Project 1794. This project was created with the goal to build a sort of saucer-type aircraft that would be designed to shoot down Soviet attacks. Now, the program, which was created in the 1950s, was quite ambitious and had some pretty lofty goals. A team of engineers began trying to build a disc-shaped aircraft, but here's the real kicker. They wanted it to be capable of traveling at supersonic speeds at high altitudes. The documents about this project show that they wanted to be able to travel at Mach 4, which is 4 times the speed of sound, and they wanted it to be able to reach an altitude of over 100,000 feet. At the time, the project was estimated to cost around $3 million, which is around $26 million today. And in the end, of course, the project was canceled in 1961 because the craft failed tests and proved to be aerodynamically unstable, which of course would provide a whole slew of problems going at those high speeds. Yeah, especially supersonic speeds. There goes all of our money and equipment. There we go, just scattered all over the desert. Number 3, too fast. We're at this stage in life where Teslas are driving themselves and they're driving people to work while they're just chilling on their phones. Not for me. I'm a 10 and 2 guy forever. That's hands on the wheel. I'm controlling everything. Because you never know what technology may or may not do, what choice it may or may not make for you. I don't know. On June 4th, 1996, for example, Europe's Ariane 5 rocket launched successfully, but 37 seconds into the flight, the rocket flipped 90 degrees, just out of nowhere. And the onboard computer triggered the self-destruct mechanism just 2 seconds after that point. Yeah, it just made that call for us. Rather than the launch that we heard earlier where a human made that call, this rocket knew it was going too fast and it dipped. The investigation revealed that some sort of old code wasn't properly adapted for the new Ariane 5. Old code for the Ariane 4 was used for the new body on Ariane 5. That equals problems. Now in this case, the engineers had decided that specific velocity in question was too high to become a real problem. That was only true for the Ariane 4, so things did not work. You live and you learn. Number 2, 2001 Genesis. I've personally never been skydiving before because I'm afraid of heights. I don't think I could ever do it. And I'm also so worried about the parachute not opening. I mean, I know that's an obvious, but it's a very real problem and one that we'll sometimes see in NASA projects, believe it or not. NASA's Genesis spacecraft launched in 2001, but it was 2004 when it faced issues. When the solar wind sample carrying probe was descending back to our home base here on Earth, the parachute never deployed. It just smashed down to Earth. Remaining samples were contaminated by the desert air. Other samples were of course destroyed on this impact. It was a whole mess. NASA's failure report later on in 2009 then revealed that manufacturers had incorrectly installed the probe's accelerometers into an inverted position. So the spacecraft thought it was going up when really it was going down. Yeah, it's a big yikes. Took 5 years to get answers. Nobody parachutes for 5 years. That's the new rule. And finally, number 1, the Challenger disaster. There's an entire series on Netflix about this entire situation. It's hard to watch, but it's way more informative than I can be in, 45 seconds. On January 28th, 1986, barely a minute after the space shuttle Challenger lifted off, a malfunction in the spacecraft's rubber seals that separated its rocket boosters caused a fire. And from that point on, everything happened so fast. The blaze quickly spread up the rocket itself, and the disaster led to the deaths of all the astronauts on board, including the life of a teacher, Krista McAuliffe. With it being -3 degrees Celsius, the engineering team predicted some sort of failure, but NASA had already delayed this project multiple times, so they wanted to press on anyways. The disaster resulted in the temporary suspension of the space shuttle program. More than fair. Again, if you haven't seen the documentary on Netflix, it's really informative. It's sad, obviously, but it's good to know.
Number 10, zombie star. While the idea of a human coming back to life and hunting for brains is spooky, to me the knowledge that dead stars can do the same, even the eating each other part, is both scary and exciting. This is Tycho, a former white dwarf, which is a star that has, quote, died and gone supernova, exploding into a fantastic show of cosmic energy and matter with the power and brightness of a billion suns. And usually a white dwarf will stay dead, but not in a binary system where there's more than one star at the center. Sometimes these previously deceased stars can come back to life. And they do this by feeding off the energy and material from their neighboring star and powering themselves back up, not unlike a zombie eating somebody's brains. Scientists believe that this may have to do with what they call dark energy energy as well, which theoretically makes up about 3/4 of our universe, but since we have yet to truly detect or understand it, these zombie stars will remain a mystery. But they look super cool, right? Number 9. Alien bones. Captured on August 14th, 2014 by the Curiosity rover, this photo appears to show something on the surface of Mars that could chill you to the bone. A femur on the surface of the red planet. Many conspiracy theorists and alien enthusiasts alike hopped onto this to show it as proof that there was once life on Mars, or even that humans had been there before on some sort of secret mission that went awry. NASA has gone on the record to say that it's not a thigh bone, but just a rock that happened to be shaped that way after erosion from wind or water, which we have proven existed at one point. But come on. If it really was a bone, do you think that they'd tell us? Though I'm inclined to go with the scientists on this one, it would be kinda cool if we had proof of aliens on Mars. Number 8. Eye of Sauron. The Rings of Power just finished its first season as I'm recording this video, and since I still have Tolkien on the brain, this photo of the Fomalhaut system made the cut. A relatively young system at 440 million years old. For comparison, our sun is about 4.5 billion years old. Fomalhaut and its surrounding disk of space dust have been the subject of a lot of controversy in the astronomical community. The images captured interest scientists not only because they look like they came straight from Mordor, but because of the zombie planet that has been tricky to find. The photos taken show that the dust ring is not centered around the star, but is shifted and elongated into the eye shape, which indicates something of large mass on the outer parts of the system, which scientists believed could be a Saturn-sized planet. Investigations have been conflicting over the past few years, with researchers believing on and off that the planet exists, and with Hubble images being inconclusive, which is why we call it a zombie planet, because it keeps coming back to life in a way amongst researchers. The system may have gotten its strange ring shape from all of the comet activity as well, with over 2,000 comet impacts daily, many of those comets being over 1 kilometer wide. That would definitely kick up a lot of dust, so one does not simply walk into Fomalhaut. Number 7. Sunken. Okay, I threw this one in because it's currently spooky season while I record this, and having a jack-o'-lantern sun on the list couldn't be passed up. In 2014, the Solar Dynamics Observatory captured this creepy photo of the sun smiling right at us, like its features had been carved right out of a pumpkin. Solar flares and activity on the sun can be quite unpredictable, and the fact that it lined up to look like this is pretty cool. I just hope that there isn't some giant alien up there carving into our sun to decorate their intergalactic porch. But if that's the case, what are we gonna dress up Earth as? If Earth had a Halloween costume, what would it be? Let me know in the comments. Number 6. Greater pumpkin galaxies. Sticking with the Halloween theme, 120 million light years away in the Canis Major constellation, these two galaxies, called NGC 2292 and 2293, have earned a much cooler name, the Greater Pumpkin Galaxies. Because of their orange color and the fact that they look like a jack-o'-lantern, these galaxies doomed to collide in what we will see as slow motion make for a pretty spectacular image. Not to mention that NASA released the photos on Halloween a few years ago. Though it may be a fun Halloween-themed image, there is a scary truth about them. They're on track to collide with each other. And as the two galaxies draw closer, they begin to spin around one another and could eventually form one single spiral galaxy. But when that happens, there will be some cosmic consequences. Things smashing into each other at ludicrous speeds and exploding out into the darkness with the force of many nuclear bombs. But we don't actually know what will happen until it does. While some may say it reminds them of the Great Pumpkin, I would say that it looks more like a 100,000 light year across Jack Skellington. Number 5. The face of Mars. This freaky famous photo was taken by the Viking 1 orbiter in 1976 and shows us what is very clearly a face embedded in the surface of Mars. A massive one at that, judging by the scale of what's around it. It very clearly has 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth. Uncanny, really, especially for being what NASA has called a cosmic coincidence, because with enough time and space, literally anything can happen. When investigated again in 2001 with a better camera, it was not to be seen. Was it just a mound of rocks and dirt that was blown or moved away, or was it something more sinister, watching us from the red planet, not knowing that we were finally looking back? Number 4. Black hole in the Milky Way. Black holes, one of the biggest driving forces in the cosmos. These places of pure darkness were once stars that shone bright in the sky, but when they died, instead of going supernova and exploding into a blast of color and energy, they collapsed in on themselves, creating a singularity so dense that it sucks everything around it in, with a force that nothing can escape, not even light. And while this may sound scary, they are incredibly necessary for our understanding of the universe to function. explosion. In fact, there are a few in our galaxy, but the biggest is Sagittarius A, the supermassive black hole at the center of the Milky Way. This is the second image ever captured of a black hole, and it's insane that we've developed the technology to be able to find and photograph them. Sag A sits at the center of our galaxy and is the reason why it spins and has its signature spiral shape. But the scary part is that it is not only spinning our galaxy, but consuming it, adding one more way that our galaxy can meet its demise. Not sure I'd rather that or colliding with another galaxy. Either way, none of us are going to be around to see it. Number 3, Hand of God. This is what's known as a pulsar wind nebula, and what you're seeing is a cloud of material that was ejected from a dying star, captured by X-ray telescopes functioning at different energy levels, lower energy detections appearing in red and green, and higher ones in blue. While we can explain what this stellar specter is made of, we can't quite figure out why it takes the shape it does, and NASA is still wondering if the pulsar particles are interacting in a specific way to make it look like a hand. When the new readings were taken, the ones appearing blue, they realized that one part of the hand is actually shrinking at a different speed than the rest, implying that the two areas were physically different, and making us all wonder what the hand is reaching towards. Number 2, Ghost Nebula. Known formally as SH2-136, really rolls off the tongue. This reflection nebula has some pretty startling shapes appearing within it. A reflection nebula does exactly what you think. It reflects light from nearby stars and galaxies. The energy from stars nearby is not strong enough to ionize the gas of the nebula, but it is enough to illuminate the dust and make it visible to us. Looking at the picture, it's a no-brainer why it's earned its much cooler name, the Ghost Nebula. You can see little figures waving from the edge of the space cloud. They even appear to have horns. I'm not sure what that's about, but I'm here for it. Give me all the spooky space specters. Again, this is just one of those cosmic coincidences that we can't explain, and that if we existed at any other place in the universe, we may not see. So we're pretty lucky, I guess. But let's hope our luck holds out for our final entry. Number 1, roaming black holes. Now, I told you about black holes, those things that suck in and destroy anything that comes near, even light, with no chance to escape. But they are pretty detectable, and we should be able to avoid them since they're such a huge cosmic entity, right? Well, what if I told you that there are many out there that are near impossible to detect, because they're moving? That's right. Known as roaming black holes, these death spheres fly through our universe, devouring everything in their path. Only detectable by fluctuations in mass and light, they were most likely two black holes that attracted each other, then slingshotted off one another and were flung out into space. But here's the kicker. The Hubble telescope actually detected one closer than anyone would want, in our own Milky Way. While pointed near the center of the galaxy at Sagittarius A, a fluctuation in light and space shows that we may have one of these devouring our galaxy, and we would never see it coming until it was too late. So there you go, one of my, and possibly now one of your fears, roaming black holes. Space is crazy and terrifying. It is absolutely baffling and will never cease to impress me the technology and knowledge we have developed in our time as a species to investigate beyond our own planet, especially since at the end of the day, we're all just monkeys with car keys. Number 10, Spaceballs. Over the course of decades, humans have begun to clog up the Earth's surrounding area with space junk. Defunct projects, satellites, broken or discarded pieces of spacecrafts. It will become a serious problem at some point, and it's beginning to show. There have been many instances now of strange metallic balls crashing into the ground and being found in multiple countries: Mexico, Spain, Vietnam, Namibia, Australia, and many others. They hurtle towards the Earth, and some have crashed a little too close for comfort. Most of these mysterious objects seem to just be auxiliary fuel tanks from satellites that were discarded or crashed nearby, and they fell off early, landing in a completely different place than was planned. But some of these, like the one in Mexico, still require more investigation, as they don't match any of the parts that we would have expected to be entering our atmosphere. This one even has an antenna, and reportedly fell from the sky while making strange noises, but was not accompanied by any fire, like a lot of debris entering the atmosphere would have. So where did these things come from then? Number 9, WTF. In 2013, the Catalina Sky Survey at the University of Arizona spotted an object in the night sky, and it seemed to have some weird properties. The object didn't move as though it was solid like rock, but it seemed to possibly be hollow, and it had a density of about 10% that of water, and it seemed to be about 6.5 feet in diameter. Large enough to house a person. But this didn't match any of the space junk that space agencies had been tracking for the previous years, and adding even more to the confusion, the object seemed to disappear from sight, and it was not seen again until 2 years later, when it was officially given the name WT1190F, or WTF for short. Pretty fitting. Video and photos were taken of the object's re-entry into Earth's atmosphere, which was a scientific feat on its own, but the object was never recovered. It is assumed that it burned up from the immense heat of re-entry, but many people believe that it crashed into the ocean and whatever was inside was either captured or lies in wait at the bottom of the sea, like those UFOs NASA admits that they found. Remember those? That was crazy. Number 8. Struck by a space rock. Alright, we've got two stories here, and you can either think of them as the result of a curse, or karma, or cosmic coincidence, but either way, these two women had a bad day. In 2001, Lottie Williams was exercising in a park in Tulsa, Oklahoma, when she looked up and saw a great ball of fire in the air. It was a rocket coming back towards Earth. She watched it approach, and as it got larger in the sky, she expressed her worry to her friends, but then it broke up into pieces and it was no longer visible to her. A few moments later, she felt what she described as a tap on her shoulder, and then something fell to the ground. This small blackened piece of metal had fallen from the rocket and just grazed her, and it could have been a lot worse, but she walked away being the first person to be hit by man-made space debris. But another woman was not as lucky. On November 30th, 1954, Ann Hodges was napping in her Alabama home when a piece of meteorite crashed through her roof and struck her in the side. It left a 3-foot wide hole in her roof and also left a massive bruise on her thigh and hand where she was hit. Luckily, the damages were only surface level, and though she went to the hospital the next night, it was because of her stress, not the injury. But if the space rock had been a few inches to the side, Ann would not have lived to tell the tale as the first person to be struck by a meteorite. I'm not sure if she's cursed with extremely bad luck or has really good luck. I'll leave that up to you. Number 7. Skylab. Launched by NASA as the first American space station, Skylab was cursed with issues from the moment it launched. The station strapped to a Saturn V rocket sustained severe damage during its deployment, including the loss of the station's micrometeoroid shield and one of its main solar panels, requiring it to have the first ever repair to an object in space, which is pretty cool. But it was again hit with problems when one of the pieces destabilized from orbit earlier than expected and crashed back to Earth. But it doesn't stop there. Due to increased solar activity, Skylab actually ended up falling towards Earth a year earlier than it was supposed to. There was supposed to be a shuttle mission to boost it back into orbit, but the shuttle wasn't ready in time. In an international media frenzy, the Skylab crash was everywhere. People had shirts with targets, contests were made to bring pieces of the wreckage for cash prizes, and people waited for the show. Due to a 4% calculation error on re-entry, the station did not burn up as quickly as expected, and pieces fell into Australia only 300 miles from Perth in an almost completely unpopulated area. Man, talk about a crash and burn. These scientists missed the mark so many times it's impressive the thing even hit Earth. Number 6. 300 million year old machine part. In 2013, a Russian man named Dmitry was adding coal to a fire when he noticed something strange. A shiny piece of metal was sticking out of the rock, and when he broke open the piece of coal, he found what seemed to be a piece of a metal bar with teeth, like a piece of a gear. When analyzed, it was found to be made of aluminum with about 3% magnesium, an alloy that is not generally produced today. Not only that, but further examination shows machining marks, implying that it's a man-made piece, and it's similar to those that we may find in a modern microscope or other small machinery. But no one can explain how a seemingly man-made part appears in a piece of coal that was 300 million years old. So was this thing a remnant of a past unknown civilization? Maybe something from a time traveler or alien? One explanation is that it could have fallen to Earth from a meteorite all that time ago, but it wouldn't explain the fact that it seems man-made. This little hunk of metal continues to baffle scientists today. Number 5. Nuclear nuisance. The Cosmos 954 reconnaissance satellite launched by the Soviet Union in 1977 had some major issues. The launch went fine. Unlike Skylab, its deployment also went off without a hitch, and this long-term orbital satellite seemed like another mission success for the Soviet space program. It was meant to be circling the globe for years and years, but just 3 months later, the North American Aerospace Defense Command noticed the satellite making erratic maneuvers, changing the altitude of its orbit by up to 50 miles. And in secret meetings, the Soviet officials warned their US counterparts that they had lost control over the vehicle, and the system, which was intended to propel the spent nuclear reactor core into a safe disposal orbit, had failed. And just 4 months after its launch, it fell towards the Earth, right over Canada's Northwest Territories. The Soviets claimed that it had completely disintegrated upon re-entry, but that was not the case, as we discovered a 600-kilometer path of debris leading through the country, and a huge portion of it was radioactive because they failed to launch the reactor out. We Canadians began Operation Morning Light, a recovery effort that lasted over a year and for which we billed the Soviet Union $6 million, though they only ever paid us $3 million. Many small pieces of debris were collected, as well as 12 large portions of the satellite, only 2 of which were not radioactive. Number 4. Proof of panspermia. The theory of panspermia is that life did not naturally begin on Earth, but that it began with microbes stuck in space ice that fell to Earth on meteorites, and the amount of debate around this topic is huge, and we have a few examples that may just prove the theory. The Polonnaruwa meteorite was one that fell in Sri Lanka in 2012, and meteorites are always a good find, but this one was different. 12 days after it was witnessed falling through the sky, a scientist published a paper stating that after studying some electron micrographs, his team discovered fossilized diatoms, microscopic phytoplankton, inside the meteorite. In addition, his team of scientists reported in a separate article that they are certain that it is a meteorite that originated from a comet that also contained living diatoms. The microbes were remarkably similar to those found on Earth, leading to a debate on whether it was simply contaminated from the Earth's surface. But there is another example with even stronger proof of microscopic alien life. In 2018, a meteorite landed on a frozen lake in Michigan, and when it was examined, thousands of organic compounds that were formed billions of years ago were found. It helped that the quick recovery, along with the cold temperature, kept the water inside frozen for studying. Research is still being done, but this find has thrown the scientific world for a loop. Hopefully the organisms don't leave us with some alien curse or disease. Number 3. The Chelyabinsk meteor. Many of us will remember the 2013 meteor that rocked the world. At 20 meters in diameter, it was the largest natural object to enter our atmosphere since the Tunguska event, which destroyed a wide, remote, forested, and very sparsely populated area of Serbia. The Chelyabinsk meteor also is the only meteor confirmed to have resulted in many injuries, though they were all from indirect causes. There are many videos of the event and they are truly terrifying, especially when you learn that the meteor was completely undetected until it entered our atmosphere, which caused worldwide panic. The flash as it began to burn up was brighter than the sun, and when it exploded midair, the energy output was equivalent to the atomic weapon used on Hiroshima, sending out a massive shockwave that damaged buildings and was felt and heard for hundreds of miles. All of the 1,500 people injured were hurt while running or from broken glass or other indirect factors of the meteor. There was even another meteor which was detected to have a close approach on the same day, which was 10 meters larger and flew by us only 16 hours later. Man, February 15th, 2013 was a busy day for meteors. Number 2. Oumuamua. Discovered by the University of Hawaii's Pan-STARRS 1 telescope in 2017, Oumuamua is the first known interstellar object to visit our solar system. It was originally classified as a comet, but there were no signs of cometary activity after we witnessed it slingshot past the sun at a blistering speed of 196,000 miles per hour, or 87.3 kilometers per second. It was briefly classified as an asteroid until new measurements found it was accelerating slightly, which is very strange for any interstellar body. This massive cigar-shaped object is nearly a quarter-mile long, or 400 meters, and its elongated shape is unlike anything we've witnessed in our solar system. Observation has shown that it may have come from the star system of Vega, though with the speed it was moving, it would have taken over 300 million years to make the journey to our solar system, and Vega was nowhere near that position at that time, leading to further questions. Many scientists believe that this could actually be an alien superstructure, as its strange journey and acceleration are studied more and more. Paul Kotis, manager of the Center for Near-Earth Object Studies at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, said that it's a strange visitor from a faraway star system, shaped like nothing we've ever seen in our own solar system neighborhood. Whether it's just an interstellar asteroid or someone coming to see what's up with Earth, we may never know, as it's being launched away from us after making a slingshot maneuver around our sun, the angle and trajectory of which some use as proof as the object being controlled or even driven by something. And finally, we reach our number 1, the Hypatia Stone. The Hypatia Stone is one of the single greatest astronomical discoveries that we have ever made. Found in the Sahara Desert by Ali A. Barakat, this is no ordinary meteorite, but one that contains the remnants of a rare type of supernova. Some have even described it as a supernova in a bottle. named after the ancient mathematician and astronomer Hypatia, who was the first female scholar in her field to have her life and accomplishments recorded, overcoming sexism in the process. Scientists are still learning more about its origins. It's believed that the stone was born in what is known as a Type 1a supernova, a rare kind of supernova where a dying star or white dwarf begins to leech energy off of a nearby star and regains energy in the process. These so-called vampire stars circle each other until the white dwarf has recovered enough energy to reignite the stellar reactions and explodes in a massive cloud of dust and pure energy, shooting things imbued with strange elements out into the ether. Measuring the metals found inside the stone is how we verified that it came from this kind of supernova, and that it crashed to Earth nearly 28 million years ago after being launched through space by the explosion. Having a supernova in our hands has helped us answer so many questions about the physics of space, but if you ask me, if there was one interstellar item that could have an alien curse, it's the rock that contains pieces of a rare supernova. Sounds like something an alien from Doctor Who would need to power their death machine or something.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the docking procedure. Chris Hadfield is one of the best known astronauts of all time, and he had quite a harrowing story on his first space flight. During this flight, he and his fellow astronauts had the pleasure of somehow navigating a £250,000 shuttle towards a target on the Mir space station that was about the size of a coffee cup. Yeah, the most tense few minutes of their lives I can imagine. Chris's job was to watch and communicate the speed and range information to the pilot, which is a super important job, obviously, because it's such a precise thing. There's a time window, they have to be traveling at just the right speed, and they need to be accurate. Chris explained, quote, "If you hit Mir just a little too soft, then the spring mechanisms would bounce you off." He went on to say, quote, "If you hit Mir just a little too hard, then you would break Mir in half and kill the 3 people on board. So you've got to hit it exactly right." Yeah, definitely high stakes at this point. So when the crew is about 30 feet away, their 2 sensors start telling them completely different things. One said 32 feet and the other said 20 feet. Chris said, quote, "They're either both wrong or one of them is completely wrong. Now, what do? There's nobody to ask. If the crew on board the flight deck of the shuttle don't solve this problem in the next 30 seconds, then the whole flight is bust and done." Instead of panicking, however, Chris explained that he just went, quote, "back to basics." This insanely intelligent person knew the dimensions of the docking module, so he used his thumb to help him sort of eyeball the distance through a window. I mean, that alone is just wild. Apparently this helped him to figure out that they were 21 feet away, not 32. He used his stopwatch to figure out the math of how fast they were going and when the thrusters should be fired, and thankfully, he was spot on. Chris finished the story by saying, quote, "It wasn't for a few minutes before one of us looked around and said, 'Hey, we did it, we're actually here.' That was a big relief of emotion on board." Yeah, I can imagine. In our number 9 spot today, we have the gas leak. In July of 1975, the Apollo-Soyuz test project took place, which was a historic moment for both space travel as well as just for politics. This was the first joint spaceflight between the United States and the Soviet Union, and it marked the end of the space race. And while it started off extremely smoothly and was going well, this flight soon became known for an entirely different reason. On return, the 2 spacecrafts, the American one holding 3 astronauts and the Soviet one holding 2 cosmonauts, met in orbit around the Earth and docked to each other. Here the group began exchanging information, they were speaking each other's language to make communication easier, and also just as a sign of respect. Things were going amazingly considering the recent history. After 44 hours together they parted, and after a few more days they were on their descents back to Earth. During re-entry, however, a malfunction with the reaction control system, which is the system that controls the altitude, this malfunction ended up causing highly poisonous nitrogen tetroxide to enter the cabin where the American astronauts were. Thankfully, once this spacecraft landed, the cabin becomes ventilated, which gave them time to be rescued without being fatally injured. The astronauts on board were rushed to the hospital and were found to have developed a form of pneumonia that is caused from chemicals, but within weeks they all recovered and lived to tell the tale of this historic spaceflight. In our number 8 spot today, we have Mir EO 23. This is the name of a mission that was part part of the Shuttle Mir space program, which was a quote collaborative 11-mission space program between Russia and the United States that involved American space shuttles visiting the Russian space station Mir, Russian cosmonauts flying on the shuttle, and an American astronaut flying aboard a Soyuz spacecraft to engage in long-duration expeditions aboard Mir. During this mission, on February 23, 1997, a backup solid fuel oxygen canister ended up catching fire. This fire was in one module, but it quickly began to spew molten metal, and the crew on board was concerned that it could melt through the hull of the space station. Smoke began to fill the station, and the crew were forced to use respirators to continue breathing, but of course when it rains it pours, and some of the respirators were faulty and didn't supply oxygen. After burning for 14 minutes and the crew using up 3 fire extinguishers, the fire was thankfully put out. The smoke, however, remained thick for another 45 minutes. This was probably one of the most terrifying things that the crew went through, but this certainly was not the end of the road of struggles for these guys. Let me know down below in the comments if you want a part 2 of this video, and maybe we can cover the rest of what went wrong on this mission. In our number 7 spot today we have Apollo 13. Definitely one of the most well-known space missions ever. Apollo 13 is famous for all of the most terrifying reasons. This mission was the 7th crewed mission in the Apollo space program, and it was the 3rd that was meant to land on the moon. The spacecraft launched on April 11th, 1970, but the mission to land on the moon was quickly aborted 2 days into the flight after an oxygen tank in the service module failed. A quote routine stir of an oxygen tank ignited damaged wire insulation inside it, causing an explosion that vented the contents of both the service module's oxygen tanks to space. Without this oxygen that's needed for breathing and for generating electric power, the service module's propulsion as well as their life support systems were just unable to operate. This meant that the command module systems had to be shut down in order to conserve the resources it had left for re-entry. This meant that the crew had to transfer to the lunar module as a sort of lifeboat. The lunar module was only designed to support 2 men on the moon's surface for 2 days, so Mission Control had to create new procedures so that it could support 3 men for 4 days. The crew was in for some of the most difficult times, while the ground crew worked to help bring them home alive. Safe to say everyone was as stressed out as they could possibly be. Thankfully, the crew on board the ship were returned to Earth safely, and this story, although horrifying, did wonders to restore public interest in the Apollo program. This story is one of the most famous space stories ever, thanks to the several dramatizations made about it. In our number 6 spot today we have the STS-27 disaster. During the launch of STS-27, which took place in 1988, debris from the right solid rocket booster struck the underside of the craft, which ended up severely damaging over 700 tiles on the outside of the craft, as well as taking off one tile completely. It might not seem like a lot, but every little thing matters when you're doing something like going to space. So it's important to note that this mission was classified because of the fact that there was a surveillance satellite being launched along with it. Because of this, things had to be done a little differently, so when the crew on board sent photos of the damage back to the ground, the photos were encrypted and they were extremely low quality. Mission Control deemed the damage to be just light and shadows and told the crew to continue, much to their dismay. Once landed, it became clear that Atlantis was the single most damaged shuttle that was thankfully able to successfully land. The survival of the crew came down to basically happenstance, which is just terrifying. This was only the 2nd mission after the disaster of the Challenger, so should this one have gone fatal, we likely wouldn't have seen the continuation of the program. In our number 5 spot today we have the organic object. Leland Melvin is an American engineer and retired NASA astronaut who served on board the space shuttle Atlantis as a mission specialist. He is an incredibly brilliant man with an incredible resume, and that is exactly why this story is so unnerving. He claimed that while on a space mission as he was orbiting Earth, which for the record, how cool would it be able to tell a story like that? You're just orbiting Earth. While he was on this mission, he saw a quote alien-like organic object. NASA disputed his claims and said that what he saw was just ice, but I feel like I trust the person who actually saw it with their own eyes. Leland went on to write that whatever he saw was quote translucent, curved, organic looking. I have no explanations to offer, but I will say it certainly is interesting and a little bit terrifying. In our number 4 spot today we have the space snake. Dr. Franklin Story Musgrave is an American physician and retired NASA astronaut, and considering how credible he tends to be, despite the absurdities of this story, it makes it hard to pass off as a lie so easily. While he was in space, he claims that he saw something that I don't wish upon anyone, a sort of space snake. He said that he saw an 8-foot-long white snake floating through space. I don't even know what I would do. Probably cry, call Houston, I'm not sure. There are many people who think that this was simply just a detached hose from the spaceship, but Dr. Musgrave remains adamant on what he saw, and to be completely honest, I kinda believe him. Maybe his mind was playing tricks on him. I mean, I don't know what happens in space, but I find it hard to believe that this person, who would likely be familiar with the parts of a spacecraft, mistook a hose for a snake. In our number 3 spot today, we have the lights. Leroy Chiao was the commander of the ISS in 2005, and this is exactly when this strange sighting occurred. It is said that he wasn't the only one who witnessed this though, as it is said that the entire crew was there to see this unexplainable occurrence along with him. Basically, they saw a strange set of lights while up in space. He went on to describe the lights and said that they were in the formation of an upside down V, and that they ended up stumbling upon this bizarre situation after the formation flew past them. I'm just gonna say it, we're all thinking it, it sounds a lot like aliens. I just don't have any other possible explanations, and you're telling me that the whole crew saw it? I swear, nothing will convince me more of aliens than an astronaut's first-hand account. In our number 2 spot today, we have glowing green. Gordon Cooper is a well-known astronaut after having flown the Mercury 9 and the Gemini 5, and in fact he was the last American to spend time in space alone. But despite all these exciting accolades, I want to take you to May 15th, 1963. Here he was sent off to space in a Mercury capsule for a 22-orbit journey around the Earth, and while on this journey he saw something very unsettling, a glowing green object that would approach his capsule. During his final orbit, he did tell the tracking station of this object that was quickly approaching his capsule, and they were able to pick up this UFO on their radar, but once Cooper landed, reporters were told that he was not allowed to answer questions regarding this UFO. It's even more interesting considering how Gordon has been a vocal and firm believer in UFOs, so I ask, what do you guys think it was? In our number 1 spot today, we have space music. After 4 days of space travel in 1969, the Apollo 10 astronauts, Tom Stafford, Gene Cernan, and John Young, were on the far side of the moon. We were full of curiosity over what the other side could possibly be containing, but it wasn't necessarily the discovery people were expecting. While the astronauts were taking photographs and experiencing this new to humans area, they began to hear some otherworldly music coming from their headsets, and this continued for 1 full hour. Gene is said to have exclaimed, "Boy, that sure is weird music, we're gonna have to find out about that," while John replied, "Nobody will believe us." For decades, this space music was left a complete mystery until just recently when an explanation was put forward. It is being claimed that perhaps this sound emanated from radio interference between spacecrafts. While this is a fairly reasonable explanation, not everyone is exactly convinced.
Number 10. Contractor. A former NASA contractor went on video to reveal the fact that NASA has been keeping secrets from us. She says she both viewed and heard evidence that 3 NASA astronauts said that they had seen unidentified flying objects land on the moon, but that these events were later covered up in an operation that was codenamed Santa Claus, a fitting name as NASA wants you to believe that UFOs are just about as real as Santa. She says that she had clearance to enter Building 8 at NASA's Johnson Space Center back in the 1970s. She says that she received information over lunch from officials that if anyone was ever caught exposing aliens as real, they would lose their pensions, and apparently one person in the past had not only lost their pension, but had disappeared off the face of the earth. In the video, she said, "They didn't threaten to kill me, but I got the message I shouldn't talk about it." She apparently witnessed everything from employees being forced to burn photographic evidence and seeing official pictures being airbrushed to hide UFOs. Number 9. The Kecksburg File. On the night of December 9th, 1965, a giant fireball which caused a sonic boom streaked across the sky before crashing into the woods in Kecksburg, Pennsylvania. Military immediately arrived and sealed off the area, hauling off a massive object the size of a bus to their Air Force base nearby in Ohio. The Pentagon immediately tried to cover it up, saying it was a meteorite releasing no details about the incident. But in 2003, NASA went on to say that it was not a satellite, but 2 years later in 2005 they said, yeah, actually it was a satellite, just don't worry about it. The cover-up seemed never ending, and it just led more and more people to become interested in finding out the truth of the Kecksburg file. A Freedom of Information Act was then started to get the file looked into again, and the judge threw away NASA's attempts to have the lawsuit thrown out. So in 2007 they announced they would be reopening the Kecksburg file, but they claimed that a majority of the files had been destroyed or lost, and they never released what it actually was that crashed that day. Number 8. Astronaut. Like I said in the first point, there is allegedly a conspiracy within NASA to cover up any of their employees or former employees talking about the fact that they have had alien experiences. But as I have mentioned in other parts of this list, there are actually a handful of astronauts who have spoken out about potentially alien encounters. Leland Melvin is probably best known for taking his astronaut photos with his rescued dogs, but what you're probably not familiar with is the fact that he has shared his alien experiences on Twitter. He received a question on Twitter that read, "What's your outlook about the existence of intelligent alien life living in our solar system? Have you ever witnessed a UFO?" And Leland went on to respond with, "I have not seen one in space or on the ground, but thought I saw something organic/alien-like floating out of the payload bay. Randy Bresnick and I called the ground to ask what it could be, and they said it was ice that had broken off of the Freon hoses. Translucent, curved, organic looking, with an alien emoji at the end. Of course, he explains it by saying it was just ice, but that was probably just NASA feeding them an easy cover-up. Number 7. Moon crash. The Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter is similar to the Mars Orbiter that I have talked about before. It basically watches over the moon and takes pictures of its surface. Earlier this year, they released a photo that had many people scratching their heads and insisting that NASA was doing yet another cover-up. The photo shows the surface of the moon with what is called a double impact crater. While the moon is covered in tons of craters, this one is unique for this reason. The evidence of the dozens of feet wide indentation seems to show that some sort of man-made spaceship crashed into the moon and left the divot. Many people on social media believe this to be evidence that some sort of alien craft had hit the moon, but NASA tried to shut everyone up by claiming it was just an out-of-control rocket. While they seem to know it was a rocket, they admitted that they don't have any idea where it came from or what its original path was intended to be. So even if it's not aliens, it's still pretty confusing. Number 6. Alien photo. Mars is one of the main planets that many people believe could be host to aliens, hence the term Martians and all the fictitious media that includes alien creatures visiting from Mars. On February 4th of this year, one person online dug up a photo that the Perseverance rover had taken on Mars back in 2021. The title of the blog post being, "Alien Figure Watching Mars Rover, 100% Proof of Life UFO Sighting News." The image seems to show a dark figure laying on a large Martian rock. It's distinctly human-shaped and darkly colored and stands out from anything else in the area or what we've seen in previous pictures. The man explains in his blog post everything that he believes it to be. There is a person laying down watching the NASA Mars rover from a safe distance away. The person is about 1 foot tall, 0.3 meters, and is lying down. Pinkish upper chest, neck and face, reddish hair, wearing a dark suit, but has a gray object over one shoulder. Looks like a backpack of some sort. There are even footprints behind the person leading up to the location they chose to lay down at. If you don't agree with that, then what do you think it could be? Number 5. Mercury UFO. Project Mercury was NASA's first ambitious space mission, which took place back in the early 1960s, which included 6 manned space flights. But that isn't what we're going to be focusing on. One of the Mercury probes sent out into space took a picture of what appears to clearly be a UFO. A photo that a NASA blogger found in an old disk from the mission that took place in December 1960 appears to show a strange shape that looks like it could be an alien spacecraft. While many arguments against UFOs are that they're just random space junk, this was at the beginning of NASA's steps out into space, so there really couldn't have been that many rocket pieces and broken panels floating around. The blogger says that he believes this is aliens wanting to watch one of humanity's biggest steps, not worrying about being seen because this particular craft didn't actually have any humans on it. Number 4. Deleted UFO. This same blogger also recently found evidence of NASA purposefully covering clearing up and deleting archival photos that appear to show evidence of aliens. He found a photo of what appears to be a large, dark, rectangular alien ship flying past the sun, and he also found that NASA is trying to hide it. On his blog, he said, "I found a huge rectangle UFO shooting past our sun, and it's got to be several miles across or more. I tried to find it on another NASA site, but I got an error message. Then I tried using official European Space Administration software, and again, error message. Then I went into the individual photos online and input my own URL, but these photo times do not exist. That's 3 different sources all erased from existence. I found it at a 4th source." He says that he won't reveal this other source as he doesn't want it taken down as well. There are 20 different photos in a row that all show the unidentified craft, and he calls NASA out for never saying anything about it. Number 3. Mars photos. I talked about this on a separate list, but I also wanted to touch on it here too. We've taken a look at one Mars rover photo already, but I want to dive into just how many of these there are. People are constantly picking out unexplained and potentially alien things popping up in these photos of the red planet. One of the most baffling recent images is this one that appears to show some sort of carved out entryway which people believe must lead to some sort of alien hideout on the planet, looking too precise to have been caused by natural weather and environment conditions like NASA claims. There have also been many rocks that appear to be much more than just rocks, as they stand out from anything else in the photos, almost looking like a sort of coral growing out from the ground through the dust. There are a lot of them, and NASA has attempted to explain away all these photos, but there is still just a lot of mystery there. Number 2. The Calvine photo. This one is similar to the Kecksburg file in the way that it is also a UFO encounter from many decades ago that NASA tried to hide away by claiming it was lost. The photo was taken in August 1990 by 2 hikers near Calvine in Scotland. It shows what is clearly a large diamond-shaped vessel flying through the sky, being trailed by another airplane. They took pictures and said it appeared to be about 30 meters long. It apparently then shot straight up into the sky and disappeared, never to be seen again. The photo was first given to the newspaper and then handed over to the Ministry of Defense, and then it was never discussed again, and the photo apparently went missing. In October of 2021, the Scottish Operations Records book was checked, and there was no account of anything having been spotted in the sky on that day. One determined individual, however, managed to track down the lost photo, and about it they said, "The Calvine photograph stands as one of the biggest mysteries in UFO history. Finally revealed after 32 years, it shows that answers only bring new questions." Number 1. Space nudes. In May of this year, it was revealed to the public that NASA was going to be sending a message out to aliens, calling it the Beacon in the Galaxy. It's a binary coded message that includes details about our planet and human life that is going to be shot into space for anybody to find. One of these images was revealed to be an image of what a genetically male and female human look like, and yes, it has all the details. It also includes a diagram of gravity so aliens know which part of us is the top and which is the bottom. Other images included are the solar system diagram, a map of Earth's landmass, and depictions of things like mountains and trees. So yes, NASA is actually sending our nudes out to space. The fact that they are doing this shows that at least a small part of the organization believes that aliens are out there to receive this message.